Star Wars Return of the Jedi was a film to wrap up the original trilogy, and while the inclusion of more family-friendly elements divided some audiences, there's just enough dark elements to balance it all out, and is honestly my second favorite Star Wars film. Without going into spoilers, the space battle of Endor was really epic, and I really like the inclusion of the Ewoks. The confrontation with Darth Vader and the Emperor is one not to be forgotten. It has everything that would be perfect for an arcade game adaptation, and yet it ultimately failed miserably in 1984. Hello everyone, Alec Alcher, the SideQuest Gamer here, and I'm just gonna say it, this game sucks. Yeah, I'm just gonna say that right at the start, because how could they make a game like Star Wars Return of the Jedi so poorly? First off, I'm not saying it sucks just because it doesn't have the vector lines that the other arcade games have, because this did come out before the Empire Strikes Back adaptation, so it's not going to be the focus of criticism, given how it wasn't a set-in-stone series standard. I get that they want to make a licensed game close to the movie's release date, that's all fine and good, and I do like the intro cutscene basically summing up parts of the story the levels are covering, being the Battle of Endor towards the end of the third movie. I'll even admit that even today the raster graphics don't look half bad. I mean, it's nothing to die for, but for 1984, it's a very acceptable art style. But do you know what isn't fine? The design choices Atari went with. Like, it only has 3 stages, one where you get to ride a speeder bike in the forests of Endor, and another where you fly the Millennium Falcon through the Death Star, and in both stages you shoot enemies while avoiding obstacles. But the problem is, because you're going so fast, you can't see the obstacles ahead of you and react appropriately until it's too late. Not to mention each level is in this weird isometric point of view that just makes adjusting to the controls feel awkward. I mean, you can move ahead or retreat behind as well as move left and right, and shoot with the trigger button, but this point of view does not complement this control scheme at all. Like, why couldn't they just make the game top down? It would only make adjusting to the controls easier, and given the raster graphics, the isometric point of view doesn't help me get sucked into the world unlike Sonic 3D Blast or Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. Those games kind of nailed the 3D look and the isometric angle, and even though those games are far from great, they did at least improve the presentation for those games. And sadly, that's all there is to this game. It's nothing more than a game of memorization than it is skill. And sure, while a game is short, even if the obstacles were memorized, what fun is there to be had? There is never a wow kind of moment like there were in the other 2 arcade games, except for, wow, this game really sucks. I mean, the trees are frequently annoying hazards thanks to this isometric point of view, but did I mention how annoying the Ewok traps are? Look how much space they take up. The game is only ever amusing when I bump into an enemy and they careen into an obstacle, but even then, that's just one microscopic positive in a shark-infested sea of negatives. And get this, after a loop, the third stage that's now in between the speeder bike and Death Star stage, that's honestly the best one in the game. For one, you play as an ATST firing at logs and avoiding them while every few seconds it switches to the Falcon that's just fighting TIE fighters. And because the ATST is slow and the Falcon doesn't move fast, the level is actually tolerable. You have enough time to deal with the onslaught of enemies, but despite all that, the game is still kind of dull. Like, there's hardly any sense of accomplishment even with these levels. It's still better than the frustration of the previous and following levels, but it's sad that even in its best, the game is still unsalvageable. And that only begs the question as to why couldn't the rest of the game be more like this? I mean, a game about not only fighting enemies, avoiding obstacles, and getting to the end for points, that sounds like a fantastic idea, but the execution as a whole is worse than Order 66.
You rebel scum.
And that's unfortunately kind of a bad note to end this Star Wars arcade trilogy retrospective, because overall, this game is bad. It's no wonder that while the original Star Wars arcade game had a legacy of its own, this one fell into the depths of obscurity where it should remain. I'm frankly surprised that top 10 lists of worst Star Wars games don't list this one on there, yet would list something like Star Wars Yoda Stories or Chess or something like that. Like, those games are pretty far down the rabbit hole of obscurity. Maybe it's because even though this game was re-released through Star Wars Rogue Squadron 3 Rebel Strike, you had to use a passcode to access it, since there wasn't really a known way to unlock it. But regardless, this game is not fun. Spread the word, and I mean play it first so you have the right to spread the word, but make sure the internet knows this game is to be avoided at all costs. But like the Jedi, it's time for this mini retrospective to end. Despite ending off this retrospective on a more negative note, it was interesting checking out these arcade games because at first I thought I'd just play it for the sake of checking off another game on my gaming bucket list and then never play it again, but I was pleasantly surprised that Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back kept me coming back for more and more, and I never got sick of them. And now I just feel the need to spread the word on these games to newer generations of gamers, so the joy of playing them is never forgotten about. And that's not it for the arcade Star Wars games, because in 1993, Sega released what was simply called Star Wars Arcade, and in 1998, there was also the Star Wars Trilogy Arcade. Both are rail shooters with full 3D graphics, and while I've not played them myself, nor will it be cheap to play them, they do look like they keep the spirit of the original trilogy of the movies alive, even in a time where the special editions would cause some controversy. Anyways, that's enough Star Wars for at least, well, all year. I was originally going to do Jedi Knight Mysteries of the Sith, which is an expansion pack to Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, which, given the reception of that video, was relatively positive, so... But you know what, I'll save that for when episode 9 comes out, and even then, like, plans are always subject to change, because I can't really plan out the years just like from the past year. Like, you know, that's just not how I roll. I'm not that kind of guy. But anyways, thank you all so much for the continued support on this channel, and the next review should pique everyone's interest for the most part. I know there's definitely a lot of hype around the games I'll cover, but until next time, thank you all so much for watching, and remember to stay awesome.